I've seen the hysteria on Facebook and gets promoted sometimes about that busloads of people are being shipped from Chicago to some other place in Illinois. That's not happening. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen.
Well, the governor often likes to call people names and say people are acting hysterical or whatever, and that's usually his reaction to, I think, mild-mannered people just asking reasonable questions.
That's Governor J.B. Pritzker earlier this week, followed by State Senator Jason Plummer, who I chatted with yesterday to get reaction to the governor, who said that there's hysteria around the concerns people have seeing the influx of non-citizen migrants to the state of Illinois. Welcome back, Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Appreciate you guys being here. Here's just a little bit of what the governor had to say on Monday at an unrelated event where he talked about the migrant issue, and he was asked about the sanctuary state policies, and he said, no, let's never use that term. But the state does have the Trust Act, which says you can't enforce federal immigration law if that's the only thing somebody has against them. So if they're, getting pulled over for a traffic violation and they just happen to be an illegal immigrant, local police can't assist federal authorities in detaining that individual and ultimately leading to some kind of deportation. But the governor, after talking about that, he then went on to say that there's a lot of, quote, hysteria out there on, quote, Facebook that he's worried about seeing more and more of. And he says he's pushing back against that.
There's a lot of hysteria that's going around about the fact that we have legal asylum seekers. They have papers, they're here legally in this country while they get a hearing, while they wait for a hearing, and that we're, trying to provide them, those who don't have work authorization, and we're trying to get more work authorizations for them because there are jobs available in Illinois for them. But we're just trying to provide them with some basic humanitarian care. And we've done that, I believe. I've seen the hysteria on Facebook and gets promoted sometimes about that busloads of people are being shipped from Chicago to some other place in Illinois. That's not happening. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. We are receiving busloads of people from the state of Texas without any prior notice of their arrival, sometimes in the middle of the night. Why do they do that? Because they want to cause chaos. We have managed to rein it in so that it's not chaos. And indeed, our goal here is to help people get to their hearings, to get determined whether they actually can have legal asylum and stay in the United States or be deported by that hearing. But it's our job, I believe, to act in a humanitarian fashion. It's what Illinois, I believe, stands for. It's who we are as Illinoisans, and we will care for them. We believe that comprehensive border security as well as immigration reform will help us manage this in years going forward, but we're going to do everything we can right now.
So the governor saying that there's hysteria. When I chatted with State Senator Jason Plummer, a Republican from Edwardsville, he said that this is just typical of the governor.
Well, the governor often likes to call people names and say people are acting hysterical or whatever, and that's usually his reaction to, I think, mild-mannered people just asking reasonable questions. And there's a lot of people in Illinois that have questions about what this administration's policies are and what this administration's solutions are for some of the real problems we're facing. Some of those problems are really being stressed by the migrant situation that's occurring in Illinois right now.
So Plummer was also discussing the priorities and how you've got a budget coming up and the costs continue to stack for the non-citizen migrants here in Illinois for things like healthcare and housing and food and education and even legal assistance, as you heard the governor say, to get people to their asylum hearing. So what about all those priorities? Again, more from State Senator Jason Plummer. Dan, go.
Right. So what is the governor's priorities other than running for president? I mean, this governor has continued to show that he is not going to prioritize the most vulnerable Illinoisans. When I talk about the stress that the migrant crisis is putting on our systems, Well, we can get into the finances here in a second, but what we're doing to the education system, criminal justice, social services, housing, all of these things, there's a dollar cost to them, but there's also an opportunity cost to them. And that opportunity cost is Illinoisans aren't getting those services. Illinoisans are being pushed to the back of the line by people who are not Illinoisans, who this governor invited to the state. The governor will downplay the numbers, but at the end of the day, Illinois taxpayers are going to spend well north of $1 billion. Some people say now we're approaching two, if not more than $2 billion on non-citizen migrants in the state. We simply can't afford it. But in addition to not being able to afford it, we're raising taxes on Illinoisans and we're taking services away from Illinoisans to support folks that this governor invited to the state.
And you heard the governor say that those here as non-citizen migrants are here as legal asylum seekers. Keep in mind, those asylum hearings could be 7 years off into the future. So are they just going to hang out here that entire time? Plummer being asked about, are they all really here as asylum seekers?
Yeah, well, anyone that takes a walk downtown Chicago and looks at the way some of these folks are housed, they look at the encampments, they look at everything that's going on. For this governor to even pretend there's any structure or organization to this process, he's just fooling himself. What he has done with a few like-minded individuals from around the country is they have created a flood of migrants at the border. Texas, Arizona, these places have been absolutely overwhelmed. Now they're in California. Now they're in Illinois. Why are they in places like this? Because we've invited them. To pretend that there's any rhyme or reason or structure or organization is the governor just once again gaslighting the people of Illinois. And I hope that the media and I hope that the folks that are in a position to ask questions don't let him do that. One item that we don't touch on, because we often talk about the massive costs and we talk about the stress on our social service providers, but these migrants, what they go through on their journey to Illinois, that this governor is prodding them to embark upon, the rape, the trafficking, the fentanyl that's coming with them, that's killing 100,000 Americans a year, the abuse, the families being broken up. It is an absolute tragedy. It is a humanitarian crisis. And we see these people who are being put in really bad spots, and they land in Illinois, and the state's not prepared to handle them either. This governor has really created a real crisis. And instead of calling people names and saying that folks that ask questions are hysterical, he needs to tell us what's the solution, how are we going to afford it, and how do we fix it long term? Because the problem is only going to get worse until we have leadership in the governor's mansion.
So you heard Plummer there address not just the cost, but also the humanitarian concerns. But you've got all of these different policies that have been in place that Governor J.B. Pritzker has enhanced from the previous Republican governor, Bruce Rauner. Those policies including the Trust Act, which prohibits local law enforcement from assisting federal immigration authorities in enforcing immigration. You've also got the non-citizen health care that started in 2019 and then ballooned in costs and expanded to 42 and up, to the point where the governor actually had to put controls on that to limit people from signing up because it kept growing and growing in cost. I think the estimated cost now is upwards to $700 million a year. You've got the hundreds of millions of dollars that is costing taxpayers in Chicago and the state of Illinois for direct services like food and housing and school and even legal assistance for work permits and even their asylum hearings. So all of these policies, Plummer says, is a real big magnet for those individuals seeking Illinois as a place to land their feet.
Well, they're not just a magnet, but they're the biggest magnet of the 50 states, right? So, we talk about a lot of these things, but let's just drill down into the numbers. The gold-plated Cadillac healthcare plans that these migrants receive is better than the healthcare plan that any Illinoisans receive. It's a fee for service, so it costs about $1.75 for every dollar we would spend on a similar federal-backed program. And on those federal-backed programs, we're getting reimbursed at like 50 cents on the dollar. Well, on this plan that's nearly twice as expensive, we're getting no federal backing. So it's a fee-for-service plan that's obscenely expensive, that is better than any Illinoisan gets. I mean, if that were opened up to just citizens around the country, we would see a swarm of citizens coming to Illinois to take advantage of that healthcare program. We just don't offer it to citizens; we offer it to non-citizens. So it's a huge magnet. It's a bigger magnet than any other states offer. What are other magnets? It's the housing, it's the education, it's the legal assistance, it's the lack of law enforcement and criminal justice. So now we see gangs from Venezuela and these other places that are organized criminal groups that are taking advantage of this governor's soft on crime policies to victimize Illinoisans. So we have a huge magnet for these folks. And unfortunately, in some instances, it's a magnet for people who aren't coming to Illinois to do good, right? And that's a real problem. Illinoisans are paying for it. The governor doesn't have a plan, and it's only going to get worse until we have leadership.
So the governor says the chaos is because of states like Texas sending non-citizen migrants crossing the border illegally to blue states to cause chaos, put pressure on them, and so on, make them look bad, and also harm those migrants. But Plummer says that this is just a byproduct of the Democrats' policies nationwide.
Well, I think it's happening in mass, specifically in Illinois, because of what we just discussed. And there is a crisis on the Texas border. There's a crisis in Arizona. But, governors like J.B. Pritzker and Gavin Newsom and mayors like Eric Adams and Brandon Johnson and other mayors around the country, right? They're all about being a sanctuary city, and they're all about being a sanctuary state until it's happening to their city and their state. They're fine letting Texas suffer and deal with the tragedy that they're creating. They're fine letting Arizona deal with it. But then when Texas and Arizona says, hey, pay your fair share, J.B. Pritzker, then he wants to moan and complain and blame Governor Abbott. It's hypocrisy at its finest, and it's typical of this governor, right? Have you ever seen J.B. Pritzker accept responsibility for anything? No, he plays word games and he blames other people while calling them names. And that's what he's doing to Governor Abbott. The nice thing about the governor doing that is, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat or independent, nobody buys that for a half a second. This governor is incapable of accepting responsibility, and the more that his excuses and his blame games become ludicrous, the more people see through his lack of leadership.
But I also asked Jason Plummer, state senator from Edwardsville, when I chatted with him yesterday, about the political calculations behind all of this.
Well, I think anyone that assumes that there's not a political calculation being conducted by certain Democrats as part of this migrant crisis nationwide, I think they'd be fooling themselves. And again, that takes me back to the human tragedy of the situation. You have some of the most vulnerable people on this planet getting abused, getting trafficked, getting raped, getting murdered, being forced to transport fentanyl that's then killing Americans. And at the end of the day, a portion of why this is occurring is because of a political calculation of the Democrat Party. And everyone knows that, Greg. And I just can't imagine something more evil and more disgusting than that. We're supposed to be working to take it to help people who are in a vulnerable position and to take the initiative and fix some of the problems. And as we've seen with the migrant crisis, we're making problems in Illinois for citizens and non-citizens even worse.
Appreciate State Senator Jason Plummer taking the time with us yesterday to react to Governor J.B. Pritzker and his comments about, quote, hysteria around the migrant crisis. So there you have it. The latest in the back and forth there here with Bishop on Air. Greatly appreciate you guys being here and joining me each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, all right?